Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here today with Bruce McCurdy. Welcome, Bruce.
Hey, David. How are you today?
It's a very good day. Nice and sunny out. I'm looking forward to getting outside. And big news, my parents are in seniors care here in Alberta, in Edmonton, where there's hardly any spread of the disease anymore. And they've been locked down, everyone in seniors home for months now, and they're finally able to get out to visit people. So I can't tell you what a relief that is for me, and for I'm sure everyone who's got a loved one in seniors care, they can finally see them in a safe way. So big moment.
Yeah, that's got to be mammoth.
Very hard on people, this whole thing, on so many levels. It's hard. And being cooped up, for the elderly people, being cooped up like that in their rooms is just really hard.
They live in the same home together?
Yeah, my parents are together. Same apartment. Well, it's independent living, like with some with care.
Well, they got it better than some people do. At least they got each other. And
yes.
You hear of these sometimes cases where both seniors wind up in care, but in different facilities, and that's brutal. So.
Yeah, that's common. Bruce, we are going to talk about COVID-related stuff in terms of the likelihood of Edmonton being chosen the site. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about NHL.com picking Leon Draisaitl as the MVP. We'll talk about the Oilers' likely 28-man plus goalies roster for the coming NHL playoffs against the Chicago Blackhawks, and what the odds makers are saying about the Oilers in that regard. Let's actually start there with the odds makers.
Okay.
Both the Vegas odds makers that I looked at, I think they're Vegas, they're online betting services, both had the Oilers ranked 11th out of the 24 teams, right, in the playoffs, 11th out of the 24 teams in the playoffs, which I thought, Bruce, was low. Of course, they're setting the odds. They're using lots of math, lots of analytics, and they're also trying to draw in bets with their odds. But when I look at the Oilers, Bruce, I look at them as two different teams this year. One before Yamamoto and one after Yamamoto. Before Yamamoto, they have actually in December not one functional line because McDavid and Draisaitl are not playing well. After Yamamoto, they have at least three functional lines. They've got strong depth on defense. And so in the post that I did on this, I looked at which teams essentially from December 31st on, which was Yamamoto's first game in the NHL. What were their winning percentages after that? Because I think that gives you a much better idea of this current Oilers team against the rest of the NHL. And that Oilers team was missing Connor McDavid for 7 games in this stretch. They played 30 games, the Oilers did, and they had a points percentage of 0.650, 0.650, which was the 6th best points percentage in the NHL in that time. So I would say it's fair enough to rank them as the sixth most likely team to win the Stanley Cup. Although this 5 teams ahead of them would be obviously more likely, and those teams are Tampa Bay, Boston, and Philadelphia in the Eastern Conference, and only 2 teams in the West: Colorado, which had a 0.677 winning percentage in that stretch of January, February, March, and the Colorado Avalanche, 0.677. And so again, the Oilers at 0.65. So just a little bit, just incrementally behind both Colorado and Vegas in that last stretch of the season. And the next best team in the West was Dallas at 0.586 points percentage, which is significantly below the top 3 teams, and will play into some people's hatred of Dallas being rated higher than the Oilers in the first round of the playoffs.
Dallas enters the playoffs on a 6-game losing streak. That Dallas?
It's nice to see.
But nice it's assumed that they're going to win their next 2 games and overtake Edmonton?
I have to drink.
I don't like it, David.
So Bruce, what I just think, I don't know, like, am I not getting something right here? I think the Oilers are listen, they're one of the I say they're one of the top. I think this is the best way to look at it, the most accurate way to look at it. They should be considered heading into the playoffs one of the three teams most likely to come out of the West, and it's a dead heat between those three teams. That's how I see it. I think that's the fair way to look at it. But that's not how Vegas is seeing it. How do you see it?
If I was doing the odds, I would rate all of the bye teams basically above everybody else, and because they only have to win four series, they only
That's a
have to
good
flip
point.
the coin four times instead of five. So I bet you'll find the 10 teams ahead of Edmonton are the eight bye teams, plus maybe Pittsburgh and one of the other high Eastern teams that's in the play-in round. So the Oilers are probably ranked third of the 16 teams in the play-in round.
Well, Nashville's ahead of them.
Yeah.
Nashville's ahead of them. Pittsburgh is ahead of
Yeah.
them.
Okay.
But why Nashville?
Because the punters like Nashville. I mean, part of the laying of betting odds is where they think the bettors are going to go and where they think, well, Nashville people have a high opinion of the Preds for, a number of years of being a strong team. They're going to be um, a popular bet regardless of, team strength. I mean, Edmonton mashed the Preds 3 out of 3 games this year. So, I mean, in our experience, we see the Oilers better than Nashville. At the same time, Oilers got mashed 3 out of 3 times by Minnesota, and I think they're probably odds are below Edmonton. So, I mean, the in-season games tell us something, but not everything. But I,
It is a good point you make, Bruce, about the extra round of the playoffs Oilers have
no,
to
it's
play,
huge.
and
It's
your odds
huge.
of winning go down. Consider, let's say the Oilers have 60-40 chance of winning that first
Hmm.
series, or 70-30. I would say seven
Hmm.
out of 10 times. I think the Oilers would beat the Hawks. Probably 8 out of 10 times, 80%
Hmm.
chance.
I'm more concerned about the longer term toll
Fair
that
enough.
the extra series will have.
St. Louis only had a 0.581 winning points percentage. Excuse me, points percentage, not winning percentage. 0.581 points percentage
Hmm.
after in that stretch of 30 games, 31 games for them. And of course, they have the terrible thing with Jay Bouwmeester. They're going to
Right.
really miss that player. Like,
Mhm.
he's a hugely significant player. Although St. Louis has a lot of depth on defense too, but
I don't suppose it's something that the extra layoff is going to cure. I have my doubts we'll
I
ever
don't
see
think he ever.
Bowmeister in the
I
league again.
think I think that was his word, if I'm not mistaken, if I recall
Mhm.
correctly, that he made it pretty clear that he's not expected to be an NHL player again. Although,
Oh,
never know.
brutal.
So I'm saying Vegas has it wrong. You're saying maybe they're kind of got it right.
Well, yeah, I mean
They're not dummies. I know that.
they're laying odds against the gamblers, and
Yeah.
they're trying to sort of anticipate where the money's going to go, and if they bounce it right, they make money no matter what, right? So they'll overrate a team like the Leafs because they know there's lots of gamblers that like the Leafs and will put more money on them than they deserve.
The Leafs are
Uh,
25-1, and the Oilers are 25-1
uh-huh.
odds. Yeah, the Leafs aren't nearly as good a bet as the Oilers. Just kidding, Leafs fans. Just kidding. They're not though. Not even close. Vancouver 40-1. Arizona 50-1. Calgary Flames 50-1.
Wow.
Bruce, the Calgary Flames and the Winnipeg Jets. I think the Jets are 66-1, if I'm not mistaken. That is a tough series for both teams right out of the hoop, and I love that. I love that one of those are going to knock each other out. Good stuff. So those are two
That
tough
used to
teams.
that used to happen in the '80s, and the Jets used to beat the Flames, and then they could never beat the Oilers. It was great. 2 times, I think '85 and '87. Winnipeg took out Calgary in the opening round of the playoffs, and then got swept by the Oilers in round two.
So Bruce, let's go to the 28-man roster plus goalies issue.
Hmm.
Any so the Oilers can have you have this huge inflated roster because presumably if a player gets COVID, they're going to have to sit out for 2 weeks,
Yep.
and there might be other players who are also infected. They'll have to sit out. Whoever gets it's going to have to sit out. So you could lose 3, 4, 5 players.
Right.
It's a very infectious disease. So even with the measures they're going to put in place to have that not happen, it could happen. So they're going to have these massive rosters. Um,
Well, it's playoffs anyway. I mean, playoff
have
hockey
that
is an
anyway.
infectious disease in its own right, and you need to have subs on hand, especially if you're going to be in a bubble. Like we've been talking about taxi squads on and off here for a couple months, since all this has come down, and so the league has acknowledged that by apparently agreeing to, assuming the Players Association is on board and everything, 28 skaters on the roster plus ex goalies. I guess goalies are different than normal people, so there's no limits on goalies. You can have three, four, five, eight goalies if you got them in your organization. Uh, but the issue being uh, the uh, there's not that much room on the ice for that many goalies, and also every goalie you add to the team, you have to take away one of your team personnel because your overall contingent has to be 50 people or under. So
Okay.
you at a certain point you're going to be cutting out the video coach or some guy that you probably want in there. So there's an upper limit on goalies, but uh, there's also the opportunity. For instance, the Oilers could uh, bring in a youngster like Olivier Rodrigue, give him the experience of being in an NHL dressing room in playoff time, and with no expectation whatsoever that he would ever have to play. Whereas I think with the 28 skaters, they want to have guys that can help them, right? I mean, there's no limit on goal. Like I'm projecting, they will have two extra goalies, um, and they could add Rodrigue or not, depending on whether they wanted to. But I'm not on board with this idea that they might bring in players that are nowhere near ready to give them this bit of pro experience. I think they want to go with the guys they have who could play and help the team. So,
So
uh,
Bruce,
yep,
you have let's not talk about the everyone on the Oilers roster at the end of the
okay,
year. Like they're going to be.
yep,
Let's just talk about the sixth line and fifth pairing as you
yep,
describe it,
yep.
and the candidates for that. So you have Tyler Benson, Marcus Granlund, Thomas Yurcho, William Lagesson, and Evan Bouchard,
Hmm.
and you don't have. Let me just go through your list of who you don't have here. Ryan McLeod, Brad Malone, um, Kirill Maximov, Josh Curry, Cooper Marody, Joe Gambardella. So just why did you pick, like, I guess the questions that I have, why Grant, do you think it'll be Granlund? I mean, he would make the most sense, but again, there's
Yep.
this issue with Russia, and I just think they might
Hmm.
pick Ryan McLeod
They might.
over
But
Granlund, and that would be my only debating point with you. I think that they might pick Ryan McLeod over Granlund.
McLeod was the closest one in my mind, to making that 28 skaters list. And in fact, I had him in there, and then I found out that Thomas Yurcho's hip injury he was supposed to be ready to go at the end of March, so he is certainly should be ready by now. And
Yeah,
I thought, between a guy that's never played an NHL game versus a guy with over 200 NHL games that was on the team earlier this year, was playing well in Bakersfield, and then he got hurt. At that Ken Holland knows well, and that he's one of Ken's pros, that's got a bunch of hockey under his belt. My inkling is that Holland would prefer to go with the older player for this stretch run. I mean, we're talking about potential fill-in guys here, but let's say they did have a couple of injuries on the wing. Would you be more comfortable with Thomas Yurcho stepping in, or with Ryan McLeod, who's never played an NHL game? And I think from Ken Hall's point of view, the answer to that is fairly straightforward.
you know who I would pick? Joe
Hmm.
Gambardella over both of them. Like if I wanted to
Yeah.
win an NHL playoff game,
Hmm.
I would hands down pick Joe Gambardella over Thomas Yurcho or Marcus Granlund or Tyler Benson or any of those guys. Because
Hmm.
watching Gambardella in the playoffs last year, he was a force. He brought that physical, hardworking game, and put him on a fourth line. He will just work like crazy. He'll hit. He'll be the ultimate energy player, and I just think he could have more of an impact. I like Tyler Benson actually. I might go with Benson because Benson's a much better
Mhm.
hockey player than Joe Gambardella at this point, I think. But Gambardella, just if you want to win a game, he's a veteran player. I would go with him over your Joe, but I
He
don't
had a
think they'll do
he
that.
had a he had a poor year, and
He did.
he never played an NHL game this year, and that part of what I leaned towards was the guys that were on the team this year, and in fact, of my 28 skaters, only one, Evan Bouchard, didn't play a game in the NHL this year. He did get called up, but he just watched from the press box. But he's clearly the organization's top prospect, and he's a guy that you could see a situation where they would say, "Okay, Evan, you get in there and play." And these, he's got that, and there is the aspect of giving that young player that chance. And he's at that stage in his career where it would be a good experience for him. Whereas, say, Philip Broberg, uh, who's a year behind Bouchard, I just don't see the rush in using one of those roster spots just to give him the experience of playing. But everyone but Bouchard on the list that I picked, and of the li- list of guys that I said were in the conversation but ultimately not there. Only one of them did play any NHL games this year, and that is the disgraced Brandon Manning, who I think is really not in the plans. I just put his name there because he was an NHL experienced player, but I do not think he'll be in the mix. So I lean towards NHL experience because I think that's the way Ken Holland leans.
I think your
But
list
I
is
mean,
really
it's
sound.
just a
Yeah.
guess, right? It's
No,
just a
your
guess.
list
So
is
I'll
good.
be interested to see how close it is. I mean, the team had 23 skaters were on the roster when the season ended. 21 on the active roster, and then the two guys that were hurt, Mike Green and Joachim Nygaard, that both should be ready to go well in advance of when they actually even start camp. So I
I
think
think
that whole team is here, and it's just five more skaters to that.
I think you listed them based in your projected 32 man roster on time on ice in the regular season,
In the
and
last game, I just used the last game. I thought lines and
okay,
pairings. People are asking about lines and pairings. That's premature. Let's start with a big team and then whittle our way down. We do have a few blog posts to write between now and the next time they
fair
actually play a
enough. Let's
game.
not get ahead of ourselves
So
then.
I thought let's use what Dave Tippett saw as his team in the last game they played and just list them the way they were used in that game. Uh, Put the extra roster players, which was five guys, and they each happened to play one of the five positions. So that's sort of one layer of extras. And then the last five was a second layer of extras from Bakersfield and that's Granlund and Yurcho and Bouchard and Lagesson and Benson. And Benson, I think, is there on merit as a good prospect who did play NHL
Played
games this
very
year
well.
and is close.
He
So
played really well in the NHL, Bruce. I thought he was a solid two-way player. He gave up very little defensively and was making good passes and looked strong out there. Bruce, who is your? I'm going to give you my dark horse candidate
okay.
for the surprise, like the player no one's ever thought of who could star for the Edmonton Oilers in the playoffs.
Mhm.
And my pick is Shane Starrett.
It's got star right in his name, David. Hidden in plain view.
That's right, like a code. Um, why do I pick Shane Starrett? Because he's listen, it would mean both other guys, that Koskinen and Smith, were injured, which is hopefully doesn't happen, but is always a possibility. Shane Starrett also went through a tough season, injury riddled season, but last year he was fantastic in Bakersfield.
Yes.
He's 25, 26 years old. He's an experienced goalie. He's an experienced AHL goalie. He was the team's best player the previous season when Bakersfield was such a good team. And if they needed a goalie, and if he's healthy
Mhm.
right now, if he comes
Right.
back and he's healthy, he's capable of winning games at the NHL level, I think. And he could come in and he could give the Oilers solid goaltending in a playoff game. So that's why, like, if people that you're not thinking of, that no one's thinking of, on that
Hmm.
on that list, I'm going to pick him as the dark horse candidate to be a playoff hero for the Edmonton Oilers.
Yeah, well, Starrett, I mean, as soon as I looked at the goalie situation, it said there's unlimited goalies. And I mean, in theory, the Oilers could bring up all four of their goalies from Starrett to Stuart Skinner to Dylan Wells to Olivia Rodrigue. Uh, but I'm thinking Starrett started the season as the organization's number three, which he clearly was last year. He had health issues, but he's had 3 months to recover. Bring him in. But in no world do you only bring him in and no other
No,
goalie
that's
because you
for
can't
sure.
rely on his physical well-being. So you bring in another of the young goalies to be, a stand-in as a guy who, in a desperate emergency should be healthy. And that would be Stuart Skinner, just based on the usage in the AHL this year. He played quite a lot, and Dylan Wells didn't play much, and none of them had a good year. The guy who
No.
had the best year was Olivier Rodrigue in junior, but he's nowhere close to being NHL ready
Who would
this
you
year.
pick as a dark horse candidate to be a playoff hero, Bruce, on that list?
On the bottom list,
Yeah.
playoff hero. Huh. Yeah, I'll go with Evan Bouchard just for fun. Just for fun.
So
But
he could get in if Heaven Help Us Bear and Clefbaum got hurt and they needed someone to run the power play.
mhm.
Evan Bouchard, I'd over anyone else still on the roster, including Mike Green, I'd pick Evan Bouchard. And yeah, I could see that. He could score a big goal in that situation. And he's a good hockey player.
Yeah, but each of those guys has one layer of replacements above him, with the
Yeah.
regular team above that. So the odds of any of them individually getting in is low. But I expect we'll see. Certainly, if Edmonton plays any number of games, at some point one of these guys will get in. Granlund or Yurcho or somebody will get in and play a couple of games just because they're down a court.
So Bruce, Edmonton has been mentioned repeatedly as a site for the NHL, possible site for this the hub, as Ken Holland calls it, to be the hub
Mhm.
for a 12 team playoff. And I kind of think that's exciting. Like I know that probably almost certainly fans couldn't go, but I still think it would be super exciting to have this activity in Edmonton and great distraction and all kinds of talk about hockey. And I'm kind of on the fence. I'm whether we're going to get it or not. I don't have any strong
Mhm.
feeling about it, but because I think that there might be other jurisdictions where the health rules in Trump's America are a little more lax, a little less exacting than in Canada. There's a little bit of trouble with the federal government right now. Will they give the
Mhm.
players, a way to come in where they can start practicing immediately is the issue, essentially as a group. And I think there's a way around that, and I hope they resolve that. But Edmonton's a good pick for a lot of reasons, I think.
Yeah, well, I guess the idea is to bring them in as a group, right? That
Yeah.
share the same air, so to speak. My sister calls her immediate family unit a germ pod.
Yeah, like
Everybody
their
in
own.
the germ pod, they can do stuff together
Yeah.
more or less as normal, and it's their interaction with the outside world that they have to be careful with. And I mean, entourage is a 50 people is a pretty large germ pod, but if you have strict protocol in place of how you're going to accomplish that, that may be a workaround. And I mean, the feds need to be convinced, but you know what? That's a good thing. I would rather, they give a hard look at the situation, and that the authorities at the various levels do to make sure it's safe for Edmontonians. Uh, but the site, my understanding is that the NHL loves the site, that the Oilers have a more complete proposal than anybody. They have that downtown, uh, you know, their own hub with the rink, the Marriott, everything in the same headway. And I'm guessing there's probably more than a couple downtown restaurants that would welcome the sight of rich hockey players in their establishment if they could work their way into the places to go. And there
You could
may
book
well
whole
be.
restaurants.
Hmm?
You could book a whole. You
Yeah.
could book 3 or 4 restaurants and just have the teams rotating from restaurant to restaurant. You'd have to. Again, there's you'd have to be careful with the quarantine and the servers and stuff. But yeah,
Right.
that's a good point, Bruce.
Yeah.
Plus, there's
So
the Canadian dollar issue that really is a
yeah,
advantage of the Oilers, right? Because they want us, the NHL wants to save money. The Canadian dollar is really low right now, so if they come up here,
yeah.
the costs will be a lot less. There's very little chance of actually contracting COVID from an Edmontonian right now because hardly any of us have it. So
Yeah.
it's
Let's hope
a
it
lot going
stays
for
up
Edmonton.
into yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Let's
Yeah,
hope it does.
yeah, it is you know, there is a lot there is a lot in favor of it. I mean, the NHL was blown away with the bid for reasons, and some of them are that, you know, the general public health of Northern Alberta has been excellent at times that have been very stressful in other parts of the world. So uh, it's, I mean, as a fan, I'm going to watch the game on TV, and it doesn't much matter to me where they're going to be played, but uh, I can understand why those closer to the team would want it to be here, and certainly Daryl Cates with his huge investment in the ice district, sorry, in ice district, no, the an ice district, this big investment in ice district, uh, that would be a win for him, and I think that's what they're angling towards. But that's I've even heard that the Oilers gave uh, on the playoff structure to curry favor in other areas. Now, who knows what's true and what's
Oh,
not?
I
But
haven't heard that rumor.
McDavid himself is on NHL.com saying that Oilers made a sacrifice as the only second place team in the play-in round. So, but he doesn't really say why.
To get the
So,
playoffs going because he wants to
yeah.
win the Stanley Cup.
All I know is if Dallas winds up being a hub, it'll be a real kick in the junk after Dallas
Are they on
sleaze
the
their way
list?
into the. Oh yeah, it's 10 team list. It's or 10 city list,
Yeah,
and
I think
LA
they're.
is on it for goodness sake. LA.
I think the NHL likes their leverage over cities and governments, and they want them jumping through hoops in order to get this as much as possible. And some of that's needed with government. I mean, with governments can move a little slowly and be a little cumbersome too. So
Yep.
they've got a it's a game they're playing to get the best deal, and the governments, of course, they politicians want this. Interestingly, we've had both Don Iveson, the mayor, and Jason Kenney, the premier, say they want this. But I have not yet heard, from Trudeau make the same kind of statement. So I'm looking forward to that, and I think we're going to hear it. I would be surprised if we didn't. Bruce, NHL.com has
Hmm.
voted the runaway MVP. So the writers of NHL.com had a vote. The runaway MVP winner for the 2019-20 season is Leon Draisaitl of the Edmonton Oilers. That surprised you, Bruce? I think he got, what was it, 12 out of 18 first place votes, with 4 going to Nathan MacKinnon and 1 each to McDavid and, is it Pasternak?
Hmm. McDavid, eh?
Yeah, McDavid got 1, but Leon kind of walked
Uh
away
huh.
with that. So that was very nice to see. Yeah. Let me see who else got some votes here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I saw a different poll that was run by one of the NHL Twitter feeds, and
Yeah.
they had 4 names on their poll, which is the limit on a Twitter poll, and uh, it was Panarin, McKinnon, Draisaitl, and Pasternak. And at the time, there was several thousands of votes, and I can't remember the exact numbers other than I know Leon had 73%. So as one of 4, to have 3/4 of the vote is a convincing runaway. And clearly those are the best candidates.
It's fascinating, Bruce, because there's that whole kind of issue of being most valuable to your team. So when you have Connor McDavid on your team and you're seen as the runaway leader for
Yeah.
MVP, to be the most valuable on a team that already has Connor McDavid, that's quite a season that Leon Draisaitl had. So I'll just quickly run down a few things, and then I'm going to ask you about something you wrote about Draisaitl.
Hmm.
So he finished with 110 points,
Yep.
13 points ahead of McDavid's 97. He got 1.55 points per game. That's the fourth highest points per game total this century, Bruce.
Hmm.
The only people who have had higher totals: Mario Lemieux, 2001; Sidney Crosby, 2011; and Nikita Kucherov, 2018-19 season.
And that
And
was
they,
very close.
yeah, he got 1.56, Draisaitl 1.55, and Lemieux up there at 1.77. He had his problems on defense now and then, but when the Oilers needed a penalty killed off, especially a 3-on-5 situations, he was out there. He played more minutes than any NHL forward. He had the second toughest quality of competition of any player on the Oilers, behind only McDavid. He played every game. He's only missed 4 games in 4 years.
Yeah.
When McDavid was out for six
Yeah,
games in February,
that's when he cemented
when he
his
made his
case
move,
for sure.
12 points in 6 games, and the Oilers won
Hmm.
3 of them and had an overtime loss, and they kept in the playoff race in those 6 games.
Hmm.
Most impressive, though, like I think in terms of most valuable to your team, you're looking for someone who drives your team into the playoffs. That seems to be the NHL definition of an MVP.
Yeah.
Draisaitl did that leading his line. His line was the best line in the NHL. There's I don't think there's any argument about it. They had a goals for percentage, the Dynamite line, of 76.9%. Compare that to the Braden Point Kucherov Stamkos line, 67%, and the perfection line in Boston, 63.3 goals for percentage. So Draisaitl, Yamamoto, and Nugent Hopkins were the best line in the NHL. And Bruce, this is where you come in. The article you wrote on the close games in the NHL was the icing, like it was the final nail in this argument, hammering it down, to prove that this guy was just unbelievable for the Oilers in the biggest game. So what did you find in that when
Yeah,
you looked at these big games?
I chose sort of a subcategory of big games, but it was the Oilers' ability to nip losing streaks in the bud. And they had something like 10 2-game losing streaks, but only once did they lose that third game and take a slide. I think they had a 4-game losing streak. And otherwise, all year long, they never lost more than 2 in a row. And often, even one of those 2, they got a point. Uh, and in the third game, Leon was a monster. Like time after time, he'd deliver. I think there was 4 different games I identified that Oilers were trailing in the third game and really on the verge of, going down that slippery slope, and they turned the game around and won it. And a couple times it was, Draisaitl scored the tying goal and the winning goal to pull the Oilers back from the brink, and he just seemed to chip in with important points at key times. And the MVP race, like it's an interesting sort of amalgam. Like you can't do it just from stats, and you can't do it just from the eye test. It has to be sort of a combination of the two. And I mean, there's a narrative to the MVP. Like you say, the guy driving his team into the playoffs, and it's like picking the 3 stars of the game. Do you pick the guy that had the best, Corsi that night, or do you pick the guy, uh, who contributed the big plays that helped his team win? And it's almost always door number 2. Well, like I say, I prefer some kind of balance. But when you look at the stats, and when you see Leon, leading the league in points, leading the league in assists and power play points and game-winning goals, in ice time for forwards, shooting percentage, all these different types of categories. Big face-off man on his team. Not the best in the league, but very important within his own team structure and that function. Like he just does so many different things, and the team did turn around, and actually once they separated from McDavid, he performed better than ever. And you make the case, and it's a good one. And this is a tough, tough, tough choice for any coach facing the Oilers, right? You got the Draisaitl on one line and McDavid on the other. Okay, who are you going to use your top pairing against, right? If they're both on the same line, it's a pretty easy decision. When they're not, well, okay, we want to stop McDavid. Okay, Leon, have at her, and that's a lot of what happened. I mean, McDavid deserves credit for soaking up the tough minutes, but Leon kicked butt with his own minutes, and when the two of them were together, which was on, still on the power play, they were lethal. So it's kind of the best of both worlds, and lots of credit to Dave Tippett for kind of figuring out the formula and getting it effective. Because, as you say, those 30 games from New Year's Eve when they split them and put them on separate lines, they played 30 games. The Oilers lost 8 of those games in regulation, 17, 8, and 5. So they were competitive basically almost every night.
I wonder if there is a redraft of the entire NHL right now. I think McDavid will be the first overall pick.
Yeah.
Pretty sure.
Yep.
But I think Leon Draisaitl might be the second overall pick. What do you think, Bruce? Is that? I think he would be. What do you think?
He'd be on the very short list. Let's put it that way. I think a lot of people would like Nathan MacKinnon. I think there's. Austin Matthews. Don't forget the great Austin Matthews. He only finished 30 points behind Leon. But he did have a game in hand. So you never know.
Is not a center, right?
He is a center.
Oh, is he a center?
Yeah.
43% face-off percentage, face-off wins. He's a center. I thought he was a winger. Shows what I know.
He's earning center with.
Some people would pick Nathan MacKinnon. You're right.
Mm-hmm. He was on the he's going to be in the finals for the Hart McKinnon, and Colorado had a very strong year. But,
Pasternak's a winger. He's a great player, obviously. Panarin's a winger, great player. Marchand is a great player. He's a little older.
For redraft, that's where
age would come into it. So you're obviously getting rid of, anyone over 25 or 26 is probably not higher on the list. But
unless you're picking for 1 year, it's like a hockey draft. If you're in a keeper league, you have a different strategy than if you're, just 1 year and you throw them all back in. Marchand is at the very high end of, he's had 385 plus point years in a row, I believe. And, that's high end scoring with great penalty killing and sort of bonus being obnoxious. He's got it all.
Be great to see Draisaitl go up against MacKinnon in the playoffs. Wow, that'd be fantastic. Mm-hmm. What a great series Oilers Avs would be. Hope we get to see that. That'd be fun.
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty. Any other thoughts, or were we going to talk about anything else? Did I say we were going to talk about the Chicago defense or not? I can't remember. Let's just wait. We'll hold off on that one.
Okay.
We got lots of time to talk about
lots of time to analyze the Blackhawks. This is the first in history where we got sort of 2 months to preview one playoff series. So
even for people like us, Bruce, that's a long time. We like to dig in fairly deeply to things, but even for us, that is a lot of analysis. We can do it.
Well, this lines and pairings, I'm thinking I'm going to write one post about the lines and a different post about the pairings, and then maybe a third post about who should be the starting goalie.
There's a thought.
Rather than burning all of that good topic material in a single post.
Well, I think you should do, actually what you should do is who's going to be the first line, who's going to be the second line. Right. That's what you should do. And then, so you could get 8 posts out of it. And because, listen, I know that level of detail you go into on each of those posts. So when you're writing about who should be the first line, you'll have plenty there for a post. I have no doubt about that.
Speaking of posts, who led the NHL in goal posts hit? Leon Draisaitl.
And by far the leading Edmonton Oiler for one-timer shots. I think he had 4 more one-timer shots than any other Edmonton Oiler. And a lot of those posts were on those wicked one-timer shots with the goalie's just at his mercy, essentially. And it's whether he can thread the needle or not. Right. What a great player. And Bruce, always a favorite of yours and mine, although I might have had a few rants about his defensive play in December, as I recall, although I was also mad at the coach at that point for keeping that line.
We were mad at Mike Smith. We were mad at a few people at that point because things were going down what seemed to be a familiar cliff at that point in time. And then that one big move by Tippett was a season turner. Well, Holland brought up Yamamoto, and Tippett found the new line combos, and that the team turned north right then and there.
It's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to these playoffs. All right,
Mm.
Bruce, thanks for talking today.
All right, thanks for listening, everyone.
And in the meantime, and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast.